Welcome, welcome, one and all. Winter Wizard here, and in this video I'm going to be divulging yet even more secrets of how to paint the colour scheme for my Death Guard army, the Drowned Plague. Ah yes, alright, welcome to part 5 in Painting the Drowned Plague, the painting series where I break down all the different aspects of painting the deep sea nautical colour scheme for my Death Guard army, and I show you how it's done. So we've got a model here. This is Gutrot Spume. We've done a lot of work to him already. We've done the Drowned Power Armour, and the Rusted Corroded Metallics. We've done the Drowned Flesh, and last episode we had a look at the slimy tentacles from the deep. And now here in part 5 we're going to be taking a look at the washed out bone and driftwood. So he's all these lovely bones and spiny bits, or these teeth on the tentacles and there in his side gob, and the lovely big handle of the axe there. We're going to be painting all of that up. It's a lovely morning here in Winter Wizard's Frozen Fortress. It's a little rainy, a little stormy outside, but I got a nice cup of coffee over there, and Dimmu, my Norwegian troll, joins me as always. So this is going to be nice. It's just going to be nice and relaxed. Going to do a bit of painting, and I got a few things to chat about along the way. Okay, so washed out bone and driftwood. So we're gonna show you what paints we need here for the wood of the axe handle. We're actually going to go for a nice greyish kind of wood. So we're going to need some Administratum Grey. For the bones, Screaming Skull, that'll do nicely. Agrax Earthshade for the wash, of course. Fine vintage indeed, and a bit of white as well. So we've got some Corax White here. That'll be fine. That'll do nicely. You can use any white you have really. That's it. Just the 4 colours. That's all we need. All right, so we'll get started here. We're going to start with the Screaming Skull. Just got a bit of blue tack to stick that down. A little paint cap to keep it open. So we'll need a couple of layers of this, as it is a layer paint. It's reasonably transparent. I'm going to start applying this. They're all over the place really. They're on his stomach, on his chest there, in the side, little side mouth, side gulp thing. All under his tentacles. There's some on the tentacles as well. And the skulls here, we're going to pick those out as well. So it'll take a little bit of time, but just be patient. We'll work our way around here. Now maybe you're wondering why we're going straight for the light paint here, the layer one. And most Games Workshop tutorials will tell you to start with some Xandri dust, wash it, then add this on the raised areas, and then you shabby bone on the raised areas, and then and this for a fine highlight. Why are we going straight for this? Well, a simple answer is I wasn't aware of that technique when I started painting, and then just for the sake of continuity I kept doing it this way. But also I want them to have a washed out feel. Well, what do I mean by that? So I want them to look like they're sort of been soaking in water and seawater, and they've sort of really faded and sort of washed out. So you'll see how I've achieved that here, and I think it works nicely. It's got to be extra neat here. We've already done a lot of work on this model. It'll be quite annoying to get some paint where we don't want it, but it's not the end of the world. You can always correct it somehow. Tidy it up. So I'm just working around here. Loads of little teeth on all these tentacles. Make sure I'm not missing any of those. Getting them on both sides. Try not to overload the brush here. It's always good to drag the brush and twist it. Keep the shape of that. Keep the shape of the brush head. Just want to say thank you very much for joining me today, whoever you are. Sincerely hope you're well during these mad times where the grandfather has been very busy, a bit too busy. Hope you've been enjoying the this little painting series of mine. If you've been following, if not, if you've just popped onto this one, well, hello, thank you very much, and maybe you'll consider checking out some of the other videos too. Just got a bit heavy here on the bone. Got some of that on the skin, so I'm just wetting the brush out. Just trying to soak that back up before it dries. Eat some of the paint in the process. There we go. Rescued. It's a little trick there. Wash the brush out nice and quick. Make sure it's perfectly clean. Wet brush. Try and soak up that paint before it sits, before it dries, and then just let that bit dry before you come back and start filling it in again. So something I've been incorporating into this video series is little topics of discussion. I've just been chatting about different hobby related things. Just gives me something to do. Hopefully you find it interesting. Don't really have anybody to talk to here except Dimmu, my little troll. So for today's topic of discussion, I thought I'd want to talk about my philosophy on collecting an army. What do I mean by that? My philosophy on collecting an army. What do you mean, Winter Wizard? Well, when I go about collecting an army, building an army for games, how do I go about doing it? What's the overall scheme? What's the plan? Maybe that doesn't really explain it very well, but you'll see. I'm going to get onto that in just a little bit. Right, so I carried on here, and we're just going to let the Screaming Skull dry. I've gone back, done another coat, so there's 2 thin coats on there. We've picked out the skull here. There's another skull on the base, but we're going to leave that once we've done all the basing work. I'm actually going to cover all those bits up anyway. And there's this lovely big carapace up the top there as well. So we've picked all that out. Just going to let that nice and dry fully, then move on to the next step. Alright, so we're going to bring out the Agrax Earthshade here. And, now that the Screaming Skull is nice and dry, and I'm going to maybe justify my reasoning for the method that I've got here. So the Screaming Skull is nice and pale, and we're going to build up the layers, the shading, the sort of darker and the highlights. We're going to build that up using just the wash, and then going back and adding a little bit of Screaming Skull here and there, and then a little bit of white as well, just for the extreme highlights. But to create that sort of washed out feel, nice and pale bone, and building up the shades just using the wash itself. I just really like the sort of the effect that it has. Makes it sort of look wet and washed out, like it's been soaking in seawater, nasty seawater for a long time. It's not really a method that I would use for maybe like bones and things on my space walls. I'd do a bit more of a traditional method, but I think this works quite nicely for the drowned plague. So I'm going to start applying this. I'll do the carapace. Show you how we do that. So just got a little layer brush here, just not to overload the wash too much. We're going to do a nice smooth coat of this at first. Nice smooth wash all over the armour, all over the carapace. I'm really working it into those recessed details. You'll see it gives it a kind of wet feel. Especially now, but when it's dry. I think it works quite nicely. So I'm going to carry on going around all the model here, building up these washes. It's tempting to want to slap loads on straight away, but just a little bit at a time, working up that shading gradually. So I'll carry on picking these out, just like that, just letting it flood into the gaps, into the joins. But so today's topic of discussion, my philosophy on collecting an army. So well, when I collect an army, I do one army a year. I start from my birthday, which is in March. I like to do one codex, one army. Not a big fan of soup or taking allies. It's alright, but it's quite like one army, one codex, one army. Building the strongest army you can with that one book. I'm not especially into competitive play. I don't really have much interest in tournaments or things like that. That might change, but I'm not really into the competitive side of things. What I tend to do is I like to pick an army that you love with models that you really like and try and build the strongest army you can with maybe a bit of theme, a bit of fluff involved that you've created. So I'm just working this around, getting in all those details, really building up those darker areas here, like in the eye holes, and just flooding that in there, making them nice and dark. But yeah, so I normally create a bit of theme, bit of fluff, an idea or something to go with my army. For example, the Drowned Plague is the tactics of the army is almost a bit like a great tide coming in, the rotten tide to wash over the enemy. So plenty of poxwalkers, trying to get a nice quick moving army with various buffs and unit choices, and lots of tentacles and deep sea colour scheme. So I like to create a bit of a theme, bit of fluff, and try and match that into the play style. But also try and make it strong as well. Try and make it a strong army, but I'm always going to use models that I love, ones that I really like as well. And I think if you can get that balance, building a good strong army that does well in games, but which is also really fun to use and as models that you really loved, and maybe incorporates a bit of a theme or a bit of fluff involved, I think you're onto something really great there. Right, so I'm just letting the first layer of wash dry. I just thought I'd zoom in and give you a bit of a closer look at what's going on here. So this particular tooth bone bit there, so put the wash on it. It's covered all of it. I've sort of manipulated it so it's much heavier, much higher build, much higher concentration of it towards the thicker ends, and especially where it joins into the skin there. And that's how we do the shading, basically. So we just build up that gradual shade of colours, dark to light, just with a nice base coat, and then just washes alone. And I think that creates quite a nice feel, a nice washed out feel to these bones. And so the wash is just about dry at the moment, so what we're going to do is, once it is fully dry, I'm going to go back over with some more Agrax Earthshade, start building up some of those areas that we want to be darker, so right in the base, the thickest part of the bones, where they're joining the flesh, on this carapace as well. We're going to make a lot of that nice and dark. Build up those layers slowly, and then after that we're going to do some highlighting, a little bit of extra fine highlights, and then that'll be it. That'll be it for the bones. Here we are. So the Agrax Earthshade is nice and dry, and I've gone back and done a couple of extra layers to it, made it nice and especially on this carapace up here, made that nice and dark. And what you can do is all the little craters and little indents and bits like that, you can just sort of blot the wash on those bits, and just blot it on, just let it sink, let it sit in those gaps, and let it dry, and that just really darkens those bits out, gives it a nice bit of dynamic to the model. And you can see that it already looks like it's been highlighted here. So this is you can see on the sharper edges and on the ends of the bones here, you can see that they're already nice and light, nice and lighter. And I haven't added any extra Screaming Skull to those. It's literally all this has just been is one layer of Screaming Skull and a series of building up the washes. There we are. So the next thing I've done now is just gone back, got out the Screaming Skull, mixed a little bit of white, and just did a very subtle, very fine little highlight, just on the very sharpest point. So just usually just doing it just like a little sharp bit of the bone there, just on the carapace up here. There's really sharp little lips there, just them, and the sort of eye bridges and the eyebrow and the nose bridge, sorry, of the skull there. Just picking those out, just lifting those up just a little bit, and that's it. That's the bone, nice and finished there. Very simple, but effective, I think. So we're going to move on to the axe handle now, the Driftwood. So we're going to go for a sort of grey wood effect here, nice and pale and washed out again. So we've got Administratum Grey. Is that a good shake? So we're just going to do a nice base coat of this first, just on the axe handle. A couple of layers to build that up. It's got all these rags and cloth and stuff wrapped around the handle. Doesn't matter if we paint over those yet, but they won't be like this for the final result. We're going to paint those next episode actually. So just work around, covering that handle all the way around. So today's topic of discussion was my philosophy on collecting an army. So I would say not that bothered about competitiveness, but obviously I want to build a strong army, an army that's going to do well in games, can hold its own. So I pick a faction I love and maybe come up with a bit of a theme or fluff around the army and try and incorporate that into the certainly into the colour scheme, but the play style as well. Yeah, the tactics, and I like doing individual colour schemes. I like creating something my own. The bases to represent the home of the army, whatever that might be. And something else I also do. Each army that I have also has its own set of dice. One army, one set of dice. And the dice are as much a part of the army as the colour scheme and the weapons they carry. So the Death Guard, the Drowned Plague army of mine, they have some orange dice, which represents the rusty orange hue of all their armour, and I say that the orange hue of the dice not only represents the heavy rust concentration of the armour, but also it's a symbol to their enemies that even the toughest and strongest of materials can be brought to decay, can be riddled with corrosion. My Admech, I've got some grey dice with some white skulls on it. And the grey matches the grey stone of their homeworlds, Phobos, the moon of Mars, and the skull, very fitting for the Mechanicum, but also a symbol of fear. Fear, the cult of fear. They are the technologies they hunt, and the fear they strike in the heart of their enemies. But yeah, so I always, each army that I collect has its own set of dice as well, and only that army uses them. So that's something else I incorporate. So we've done a nice base coat of this Administratum Grey on the handle. We're going to let it nice and dry fully, and then we'll do another coat, make that nice and strong. Yeah, so we've done another layer of the Administratum Grey on the axe handle there. It's just about dry. It's very grey at the moment, so we're gonna bring out the Agrax Earthshade, introduce some brown shading, give it a much more of a woody feel. So we got the Agrax Earthshade here again. Gonna start shading this handle in. I've gone over a lot of it up here, which could well end up being cloth, but it's just easier just to fill it in and then pick the cloth out afterwards. So we're just gonna give this a nice shade of the Agrax all over those bits. Yeah, so my philosophy on collecting an army, that was the topic of discussion for today. Just about trying to build the strongest army you can. Strongest, funnest army you can with the models that you love. That's what I would say. I'd love to hear all your own thoughts and opinions on the subject. How you like to go about doing it. Are you a competitive player? Do you really love the idea of factions joining together? Do you like your soups and your allies? Really great to see some comments. Anything at all, I will always reply to them. Encourage it. I don't want this to just be about me. Right, so the wash is nice and dry. It's really toned that right down, made it nice and dark and nice and brown. So we're gonna lighten it up again. Just back to the Administratum Grey. I got a brush here, base brush, but I kind of use it for a number of things. Sometimes I use it for a dry brush. I quite like the shape. You can feel like that sort of slanted shape. You can get quite accurate with the dry brush. So we're going to lighten this up with the dry brush highlight now. Just load some of this onto the brush. Bit of tissue. Work that into the bristles. Really dry the brush out. You don't want this paint to be wet at all. Like nice and dry, so it's just the pigment left on the brush. Building this up on the sharpest edges and the flat of the handle as well. Just concentrating mostly on the sharpest bits. Nice bit is right at the bottom here. The shading in where the wood is split is really nice and dark, and this just really lifts those out. If you're not feeling particularly confident or accurate about doing this amongst the rest of the work, then you can just could always try layering instead, just very thinly, very thin, just on the highlightest bit, just a highlight on the sharpest bits. Or you could just get a layer brush and have it sort of half dry, half wet, sort of an almost dry brush, and just very gently work some of that paint onto this handle. Yeah, so we've done that, nice highlight there, and the next thing we're going to do, take a tiny bit of white, a tiny bit of grey, just for an extra light, little dusting, just very, very lightly, just on the sharpest points now, just bringing that handle out. Very subtle, you don't have to do this bit, but just very subtle, just on the very sharpest points. And that's that. That's the handle done. There we are then, so I thought I'd give you a good look at the final result there. That's the handle done. The sort of grey, washed out, woody driftwood handle of the axe, and all the bones and skulls and teeth and spines and carapace and all that stuff as well. All nice and done. So really simple, this one. Just we started with a strong build-up base of a screaming skull and all the bones, and then we just shaded them in and built up those gradual highlighted layers just with a series of washing. And I went back afterwards, a bit of screaming skull, mixed a bit of white in, just for the very sharpest details. And the handle, similar principle really. Administratum Grey base, washed out with Agrax Earthshade, dry brush, and a fine highlight with some Administratum Grey, and you can mix a bit of white into there as well. And that's that, and that is how we paint the washed out bone and driftwood for the Drowned Plague. There we have it then. So that was episode 5 in Painting the Drowned Plague, where we focused in on our Gutrot Spume. Here's washed out bone and driftwood. We had a little bit of a chat about my philosophy on collecting an army. In the next episode we're going to be taking a look at quite a few things, the fabric, leather, rot and gore. So lots to play with, lots to do, and he's really not that far off from being done. So I certainly hope you'll join me for that one, and I hope you've enjoyed the video today. If you have, then a like and a comment would be very, very much appreciated, and if you'd like to see more of what goes on here inside the Frozen Fortress, then perhaps you'll also consider becoming a subscriber. Once again, whoever you are, thank you very, very much for joining me today. I'm Winter Wizard, that is Dimmu, and for now, keep it frosty.